Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
All right, well, we are here today with Danny Hilman Natawidjaja, and we're going to talk about Gunung Padang and the amazing stuff that you have found there. I know you did a lot of ground penetrating radar and found some interesting stuff, and so let's start. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys found and reported in this paper.
Yeah, I'm Danny Hilman Natawidjaja. I'm working with it's called the National Research and Innovation Institute of Indonesia. It's like the only government research institute now in Indonesia because they integrated all the government research institute in Indonesia become one. It's called the BRAIN, Badan Riset and Inovasi Nasional. My background is geology, specialized with the earthquake geology stuff, tectonics for a long time. I graduated my PhD from Caltech, Pasadena, my master from New Zealand, Auckland University. So, but in the past 10 years, I'm interested in geoarchaeology. It means that applying all the geology and geophysical methods for exploring the archaeological site as Gunung Padang and others actually. These geoarchaeological methods in Indonesia is still rare. I would say none, none of them. So it's like a frontier job for me. I think it's very important to introduce this method in Indonesia because it is very important. Indonesia is like a tropical country with all the very heavy, the weathering process, geological process and stuff. So most of the geological site has been buried, interfered with all the geological sediment and stuff. So we need to unravel that also the geological, not just the archaeology. And it is also important to study that geological layers within the archaeological site, in particular to determine the age of the archaeological sites. And also I would like to inform you also that most of the archaeological sites in Indonesia has not been dated by the carbon dating. That's what people maybe it doesn't know. Most of the age is just determined by, from the old transcript or just for the comparison with other areas with a similar archaeological features, something like that. But
Right.
it's lack of carbon dates data. So in the past 10 years, I've been developed this geoarchaeological methods in Indonesia, particularly in Gunung Padang. I think Gunung Padang is like one of my biggest research project, because it includes lots of people with different disciplines, geology, geophysics, archaeology, even architect and civil engineers. So it's lots of people. As you see in our paper, there are many authors, but one of the authors is not just like a single researchers, but it's a leaders from a big team. Yeah. So like if in the papers it's just like one archaeology, Dr. Ali Akbar from University of Indonesia, but that he's not the only one. He leads a large archaeological team. So it's lots of work, years of field work. Yeah.
So just a quick question on that.
Sure.
Do y'all have grad students there? Do you have like postdocs working for you? Because that's kind of how my understanding is. That's kind of how this works. Is you bring other people in and they do the work and then they go get their PhD, and that's how you get some of these other people who are working at the site. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's we include lots of people, including like the young researchers in my office, and also students and grad student in University of Indonesia for Ali Akbar, the archaeology students, because even before we conduct the study in Gunung Padang, Ali Akbar has been bringing the students to Gunung Padang for his courses. Ali Akbar is the professor in University of Indonesia in archaeological department. Now Ali Akbar is the head of the postgrad studies in University of Indonesia for archaeology. So yeah, it includes lots of people. in the research.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for people
Sure.
who didn't really understand how all that works.
Yeah. So the major fieldworks in Gunung Padang take place from 2011 to 2014, but unfortunately after that, the fieldwork is not like it's like discontinued. But we're still visiting the site for observation, like survey observation, and we continue the analysis of all data we have. We have a huge data sets, including the surface exposures, the trenching excavations that Ali Akbar have conducted in Gunung Padang, and also that almost of geophysical methods that we use. That include the GPR, ground penetration radar, the electric resistivity tomography, seismic tomography. We even conducted the electromagnetic data, but we haven't presented in paper yet. That data, so it's a huge data set, also including the core drilling. So
Right.
using all that multidisciplinary methods in one site is rare. You can explore all that published papers in the world. It's rare. Maybe that's still the only one. Particularly, it's applied to the large structures like Gunung Padang. You can also search for any pyramids in the world. Have they done the research like what we conducted in Gunung Padang? No, none. Yeah, so it's kind of frontier research. So yes, we the results of our study and in the highlight that we found that Gunung Padang is not like a simple megalithic structure like previous study says. It's only like one layer, simple on the top of the hill, the arrangement of the rocks, but it's much more than that. Even the youngest layer, we call it the unit one, is not just cover the top of the hill, but also the slope of the hill, the body of the hill. Yeah. So it's a big structure, like a terraces, like a Machu Picchu, something like that.
Right.
But most of them has been like buried under soils and vegetation. But underneath that layer, there's an other layers, what we call the unit two. And maybe people doesn't know that Unit 2, the older one, that's dated like 7,500 to 8,000 years old. But the first layer is only like 3,000 to 4,000 years old. It's old, but it's not that old. But the Unit 2 is the older one, is 7,500 to 8,000 years old. So it's very old. And not all of them are buried, but it's some of them is actually exposed in the top of the hill, forming the high wall between, like we call it the terrace one and terrace two, and in the terrace two is formed the floor of the terrace two and terrace three. So it's all exposed, and it's shaped like, well, it's an artificial shape. It's a terrace as well and terraces. So I would say for Unit 2, people just, there's no question. It's an artificial structure, not the natural layers.
Right.
Unit 3, maybe that's much more like perhaps controversial because it's very old. It's under Unit 2. And it also exposed actually the slope of the site. But most of our data is from the trenching that we dig to like 11 meter depth. So it's a deep trenching. That's the first time that we did. Nobody did that before. And from our observation, that Unit 3 is also the artificial structure. So it's not natural geological formation. We were very sure about that. It's lots of evidence showing that. And also lots of portable artifacts within the Unit 2 and also Unit 3. We presented in our paper, especially in the what was that, the additional figures, but we don't really discuss that a lot because we just want to concentrate on the geological and geophysical methods. But we do have data, and we prepare it for like the next paper. That's the plan. But there are lots of portable artifacts within Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. And I don't think there is it's an unequivocally a conclusion. It's a it's a man-made structures, not natural geological formation.
Right.
So if say that the people doesn't agree with us with the interpretation of Unit 2 and Unit 3 as the geological formation, then they have to explain what they think. They have to have an evidence supporting that this is the geological rock formation. Then I would like to ask them what kind of geological rock formation that you're talking about, how they could form like the one that we see in Gunung, that kind of stuff. So. And this Unit 3, the dated that we have from carbon dating is 16,000 to 27,000 years old. So it's very old. The carbon dating also is a very standard. There is nothing unusual. We take soil samples within that Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. And also, there are soils, artificial soils that buried Unit 3. We also dated that buried soil. We're very sure, it's very definitive that it's not weathering soils, but it's soils that put into that by human it fill soil. It's a soil fill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we need. Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
That's it. I think the highlight. Sorry.
So Unit 4 at the bottom, from what I read. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I may get some of this wrong. That's the remnants of the volcanic.
That's right.
Activity.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. That is the massive andesite, the remnant of the volcanic intrusion. It's a natural rock.
And so then what we're seeing in Unit 3 is that it looks like the natural rock has been flattened out. There's columns potentially and voids that you're seeing through the radar that tells you that indicates that it's not natural, that someone has come in and flattened this space out. Is that right?
You're talking about Unit 4, right?
Well, yes, it was. Well, within, I guess, Unit 3 is filling 4, and 4 is what's flattened out.
Yeah, Unit 3 is covering the Unit 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so 4 is flattened out. Now, is that? I mean, sort of. My brain just sort of goes to Göbekli Tepe and sort of how the ground rock is flattened out and there's pillars. Is that sort of what you're thinking that this looks like, or?
It looks like that, Dan. I mean, the Unit 4 has not been exposed yet, okay? We interpret it from geophysical data. So if we look into that, the seismic tomography data, which is very good in identifying this massive andesite, because massive andesite has like a very high seismic velocity. It's because of fairly solid rocks. The top of that massive andesite, the natural rocks, the volcanic intrusion, it's really flat and it's like following the ground surface. So the shape of the red unit, the Unit 4, is similar to the above layers. So that's why we think that that it seems to be that Unit 4 has been carved.
Right.
The surface, and then they covered by Unit 3.
So what you're seeing, just for me, what you're seeing in the ground penetrating radar and all the sensing data you did, because you didn't, like you said, you didn't get to excavate. It looks like this natural material was shaped by human hands. That's the conclusion that you're reaching. Yeah. And I would assume that, being a geologist, you've seen other structures that don't look like they've been shaped by human hands. So you've compared and contrasted, right? So it's not like we just picked a random spot and went, that was shaped, right? We compare things. Okay, cool. Just throwing it out there for people who have no concept of what this is.
And this figures that you are displaying here is very important also, but because what we are talking about, the man-made structures only on the top of that hill, the upper part of that hill, not the entire hill. The rest are natural. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I was going to ask something and I lost my question. I mean, we didn't just pick this site out of random. Was there myth and legend behind this being a much older site? Why did we pick this one to go look at?
Yeah. Yeah, before we conduct study in Gunung Padang is like almost unknown. People doesn't really care about that. It's just like unknown archaeological site. It has been the archaeological sites, but it's like a provincial level, like a local archaeological site. Has not been a national archaeological site yet. It has been the archaeological national archaeological sites after we study that. So then
Okay.
people think that, okay, this is important. So that's one of the our achievement conducting this study. So before we conduct study in Gunung Padang, I'm as you said, I'm an earthquake geologist. So at that time I'm studying one of the major active fault in this area. It's called the Cimandiri Fault. It's only like 5 kilometers away from Gunung Padang. So we have a lot of geological and geophysical data of that area to study that active fault, especially the high resolution digital topography. It's like Google Map, but it's much more higher resolution. So then we look into that Gunung Padang just by coincidence, and then we see this hill it's very interesting. It looks like different from other surrounding. So from the morphology, from the landscape, we could guessing the edges of the landscape, right? If the landscape is like very much eroded, the surface, that means it has been very old. But the upper part of Gunung Padang is like very smooth. It's like uneroded. So we think that it's like very young. It's much younger than the surrounding hills. What's going on that hill? So then I find out that on the top of that hill there are megalithic sites, which become much more interesting. So I visit the site and I think, it's very interesting. And at that time also we have like a new instrument, a geophysical instruments that including the GPR, and also the resistivity equipment. So then, okay, why not we just try the experiment in Gunung Padang, see what we can find. Yeah, so that's the start of the study. And for the first survey of the GPR wave, and also from the resistivity tomography surveys, we found that it's kind of unusual. It's not like geology. It's like
Right.
artificial. So then we conduct much more survey on that hill.
Okay. So you get your team together, y'all put together this paper. I know you went through, I think you said 9 months of peer review. I don't know much about that process. Is that like a really long time for peer review, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of long actually, but it's not that unusual.
Oh,
The
okay.
peer review process is usually taken from like 3 months to even a year.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you went through that whole process. I read through some of your stuff, that your post in response to all this, and you know
Yeah.
mentioned that you made some changes. There were some things that you tightened up and made better, and thought it was a good experience, and put it out. And I know it made a bunch of news. I was really excited to see the paper come out as well. And then not long after that, there was is there 4 anonymous complaints, is my understanding,
Yes, that's correct.
that were kind of crappy. I didn't I read through them, and just sort of things like, oh well, those dates are just too old. Like
That's right.
that's not a rebuttal. That's just like, well, maybe we've never
Statement.
found dates that old before. How do you know? And
And
so
Yeah.
go ahead.
I also have a follow up on that. I want to hear the answer, but I don't want to forget the follow up. So my background is in religious studies and stuff. And normally when someone disputes something, they don't have a problem putting their name on the dispute, saying, I don't agree with this. Is it common to have anonymous disputes? So that's what I just wanted to add to the question.
We have to dig all that cases, but it's not uncommon. I mean, people could
Okay.
not releasing their
Different
identity.
field.
So yeah,
Completely
they could
different
claim
field.
that.
I just didn't know what. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, you did a spectacular, put together that I saw it. I read it on Graham Hancock's site, and really laid out your case, and I 100% agree that this was, you sort of said it in one of those things of like they have a different interpretation of the data, which you're totally allowed to have, but like that's no reason to not to take the paper down. And so
Exactly.
yeah. So I mean, what's the like what next? Like what are you, is there anything
Yeah.
you can do to get the paper republished? Are you just going to do a different one? I mean, what's sort of the
Yes. Yes. Of course. The retracted people could be republished. So
okay.
we are planning to like republishing it, but I think we have to make it like 2 or 3 papers. So we split it into two
Oh,
or three
okay.
papers. The reason for that, we realize now that the content of the paper is like so dense of the data. It's lots of data on it and lots of method. I would
Hmm.
I would think that I think people will be very hard to understand the content, like the wholly content of it.
Hmm.
And I think it might be a good idea to split it into 2 or 3 papers. Then we could discuss more about each of the topics of the data, because in the papers we are limited by words. We already like written like a full like a maximum limits of the words, so we couldn't say
Oh,
more.
okay.
So I think we have to say more by splitting them into like 2 or 3 papers.
Right.
So I think, and also make a separate paper for the carbon dating, which is like that is the more like controversial one because of the dating. So I think we could split into like the geological data showing that the artificial structures of Gunung Padang, and
Hmm.
then like the second paper, maybe the geophysical data, the supporting the data is artificial structures. We maybe could say the relative ages or the estimate ages based on the like a weathering level of that
Hmm.
structures. But then on the third paper, we could say about the carbon dating analysis. So if people like
Yeah.
not agree with us, so it's become more clear which parts that
Hmm.
they don't agree on. Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Yeah,
So as far as the carbon dating goes,
yeah,
I mean, I read in there they're sort of talking about how the challenges of dating dirt and things like that, and I
mm,
read through your method and how y'all
yeah.
accounted for that. What
Mm,
like I mean, I know carbon dating is one of those things that some people find controversial.
nice.
I don't really know what
Yeah.
the question is. Sort of like what
Yeah,
do you?
carbon dating is very common method. I'm a
Yeah.
paleoseismology, I'm an earthquake geologist. I use the carbon dating for my life. For tens of
Mhm.
years. I know what it is, and
Right.
I know all the data sensitivity and the uncertainties. So dating the carbon dating like we do in Gunung Padang is very common also.
Hmm.
Even the other researchers who against our research doing the same thing with the carbon dating,
Hmm.
not different but us. But the thing is, this is a very controversial matter. I know from the beginning, we have like 100 samples to be carbon
Hmm.
dated. That's what we hope. Because this is something like big. We have to have like a solid evidence to say
Hmm.
something. But we don't have enough fund to do that. It's expensive. One carbonating is like $700. So
Hmm.
at that time, you just can date it like 14 samples. Yeah. So that's why in the paper we said that our carbon dating is okay, is reasonable. The result also is reasonable enough, and it also is confirmed by the level of weathering, such as Unit
Hmm.
3. We said it's 16,000 to 27,000 years old. And the rock has been very weathered, has a uh, exfoliations materials is very, very
Hmm.
weathered. And for that kind of weathering, it should take like thousands of years. Yeah. The geologists wouldn't surprise that the age of that layers is more than 10,000 years old. So it has a supporting evidence for that. But we also emphasize that we should we should conduct much more comprehensive carbon dating. So we are not, we agree that we have to do further research for that.
Yes. Well, and that's absolutely the let's not dismiss it. Let's do more research. Let's figure it out one way or the other. The only way to do that is more data.
So how are you? Well, a couple of questions. How was the initial research funded, and how? Because I get this stuff's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Time, energy, resources, labs, and how are you looking for new funding to be able to test more of those samples? Because I'd love to see the tests on all 100 samples, right? Not just 14. I'm sure you would too.
Absolutely.
So how? I guess walk us through the process of like how something like this gets funded, because you're working with obviously limited resources, so you have to try and pick the best way to use those resources.
Yes. So, well, the plan is after we publish the paper, then we have something to make a proposal, a research proposal. The research proposal has to have a reference and like a background that we have done previous research, right? So the retraction of our paper will postpone it. It's just like make our research proposal becomes more difficult to be funded because it's retracted. Yeah. So, but I think that is the goals of the retraction. People doesn't want the research in Gunung Padang to be continued, to be further research. That's what I guess. So yeah, this will be more will be postponed. Like with research, we have to. I think we have to republish it again. And also, right now, I conduct another research doing with the same methods with other sites in Indonesia. And the results of our research also different from others. It's about the ancient, one of the very popular ancient kingdom in Indonesia. It's called Majapahit, and the archaeologists believe it's only like 12th to like 14th century, like AD. But our research, our result of the research show it is much older. It's before BCE, something like that. So we have to prove to other scientists, especially archaeologists, that our method works, and perhaps they would be much more understood if applied to the archaeological site that is much more familiar to them. So that's one of the the process that we are going through. So I think after other our research has been published and the Gunung Padang maybe has been republished again, then we could make a much more like a solid proposal to the government. I'm looking for the government research institute. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I guess this is what frustrates me about someone making an anonymous complaint. It's like, or a critique. If you're going to critique something, knowing that it could completely derail the research for potentially years, right?
Yeah.
Have the courage. That's a good word. The courage to put your name on the critique, so you can at least then have a debate, right? Because right now, you can't even ask your accusers like, why do you think this, and sit down and have a discussion with them. You don't know who they are, and that's why I find it very disingenuous to be like, oh, anonymously, I just think this.
Right.
Let's have a dialogue and then try and work it out. Because what I was getting to is, are they complaining because they actually have an issue with your research, which they may, or is your research discounting things that might hurt their ability to do research and get funding and stuff for that because you're showing a different data set, right? Like you were just talking about at the other site. There's this paradigm and you're challenging the paradigm. And that seems to be in our research and our podcasts, something we're running into a lot is like anytime somebody's like, this doesn't add up the way we thought it did, nobody wants to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the anonymous research is it's not. I think it's not. They should disclose the names because it's a big issue, right? And also the critics that they claim is not commonly, it's not lead to the retraction of the paper, but to we call it the Wiley publishing call it as post-publishing critics, post-publication critics. That is much more suitable for this case of the Gunung Padang, because the post-publication critics, the people who critique the other people's works, has to explain that comprehensively, sufficiently details, scientific details, why they don't agree with the research, with the result of the research, right? And also the readers could learn about the debates or the scientific debate. So it's become a positive publication. So that's what happened.
Yeah. You probably don't know this because it just happened today, but got to bring it up. But Graham Hancock was on Joe Rogan today debating with Flint Dibble, and your research came up, and they had a little, Graham backed you up all the way, and really derided him for what was done and the way that you were treated, and it was good to see it come up, and Joe then asked a whole bunch of questions, and they really kind of dived in and talked about some of the research, and which is where I first heard about it when Graham mentioned it before, because I know he's worked with you quite a bit over the years, and it was interesting to see it come up, and
Graham Hancock debate is today.
Yeah, it was today.
The episode came out a few hours ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was listening to it on the way home from work to prep to talk to you today.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely good to hear him back you up on that, because it's just we keep seeing this happen with one thing after another. I mean, something gets found and we just decide like, well, it doesn't fit the narrative, so we're just gonna do what we can to get rid of it.
And we actually have a archaeological site not far from where we live here in Texas that was instrumental for disrupting the whole Clovis first theory. And we were lucky enough. It's the Galt site in Texas, and they've found a bunch of stuff, and we were lucky enough to have their new director on several episodes ago. And because I remember growing up with, this is the way it is, and it was Clovis first, even after this site had been researched. And it's there's still people I know walking around saying, well, no, there wasn't people here before 10,000 years ago. So it just fascinates me, because in my little bits of academia and stuff, to see how entrenched people can get in their ideas, and they just don't want to be open to a new idea, even though the scientific method says we should question everything.
Right.
And I just don't know where that comes from. I don't think it's a grand conspiracy theory. I think it has more to do with like funding and reputation, and my books are based on this, and I'll have to change everything I teach, and I think that an ego may feed into it as well. That's been my experience in seeing.
It's always
all this.
difficult. It's always difficult for the like a breakthrough finding to be accepted. Always, it's never easy. You maybe also know the Altamira cave painting, long time ago. Altamira cave painting in Spanish. It said that the cave paintings, it's like 10,000 years old, and it's been rejected for many years until he died, and finally it's been accepted. So it's always difficult. In my field, I'm expert in active tectonics, right? Earthquake and stuff. The basic concept is called the plate tectonics. Plate tectonics, and it's been first found by the Alfred Wegener. It's called continental drift, like 1908. And when he said that, when he published that in the journal, people think he's crazy. He was crazy, and it's been like thrown away from the academic record for the entire life. Until 1960, people found that he's right. So it's always difficult for the new exploration.
Yeah, I actually knew quite a bit about that. I remember that being a thing that I learned about growing up. It's like, hey, it's some of this stuff is just, and there was a good example of that I saw. I recently watched the Oppenheimer movie, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a scene in there where it comes out that they had split the atom in Europe, and Oppenheimer puts all the work on the board, and he's like, "Yep, theoretically, I've just proven it's not possible." And the other guy walks in and goes, "Yeah, but Bob just did it in the other room." You know, and it's one of those things. It's like, I'm convinced of this, but well, they just did it. And I think that's where the theoreticians, which are super important, and then the practical science can sometimes butt up against each other, right?
Yeah.
So I have a sort of technical question about carbon dating.
Sure.
Maybe you can help me with this. I know there are opponents to carbon dating because they say that it's not accurate enough, and I don't fully understand what that argument is. Can you kind of explain why that's not the case?
Yeah. Well, on the retraction notice, it's not about the carbon dating methods. Even on that, if you look into that anonymous expert claims, they don't also critique our carbon dating methods. What they critique is that our samples for carbon dating are not associated with the human-made construction or anthropological thing
Okay.
stuff, right? So the focus is on that identification of that layers. Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3 are not geological rocks, but it's a human made. So if people accepted that, then there's no problem with the carbon dating. Of course, the carbon dating inherently has an uncertainties on the soil sample, on the samples, right?
Right.
I've been done many things that. So if we take the soil samples for carbon dating that contain the carbons, but if it's not, the carbon is like not very much on it, it's like less, then it would make like it prone to impurities from the carbon for the younger carbons that been analyzed in the lab. So it's become like a younger age and stuff. So the contamination become a problem, right? So if we take if we found charcoal on the samples, that will be like the best samples, because then it doesn't contaminate it by other carbons like
Right.
younger or other carbons, right? And we don't find the charcoals on the carbon Gunung Padang. That means it's still like it could be like contaminated by carbon that we don't want to, unwanted carbon, stuff like that. And also we have to have good reason why that soil samples from the structures is connected to the age of the structures. And I think we have explained it in the paper, but then we added some more information on that figures, on that correspondence. So we can explain that very in easy way, that when the unit 3 is constructed, during the construction, that that should be lots of bioorganisms activities on that layers, particularly after the people abandon that structures. Then the ground surface, where at that time the ground surface is the top of unit 3, it's been vegetated by lots of vegetation, trees, bushes and stuff, and lots of animals and stuff, and all they leave a remnant of their carbons after they died. So that's what we date. So we hope the age of the carbon that we date represents the remnant of the bioorganisms that living during the construction and after the construction abandoned by the builders, before the other layers, the younger layers, put on top of it. So it's the same also of Unit 2 and Unit 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me say that back and make sure I understood what you're getting at here.
Yeah.
So essentially, this space is made, it's flattened out, it's prepared, and then it's abandoned essentially. And
Yes.
what the carbon that we're picking up is essentially the plant and organic matter that built up
That's right.
over time between
Yes. from roots and stuff. Yeah.
Because then it wasn't used again, and the second terrace isn't until 7,000, I think you said.
That's right. Yeah, 8,000
Okay.
actually.
So
Yeah.
okay, so this is the buildup from 14 to 8. So okay. So that
Yeah.
means essentially that the site itself, it would be older than that, than
Could be.
25, because that's the early
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Because
could
you have
be.
to have,
But we know that the range of the age is also still is large. Like Unit
right,
3, the range of the age is like 16 to 25, 16 to 27,000. So it's
right.
large. We don't know what is the exact age of that.
Okay.
And also
And
we have
more
yeah,
samples will help narrow that down.
that's right.
Okay.
Like the 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 field soils, the man-made field soils that buried the Unit 3, which is
Mhm.
very clear. The age of that field soil is 10,000 years old. That
Okay.
means the youngest age of the Unit 3 is 10,000. Should not be younger than that, right?
Okay.
Should
And,
Yeah.
not
and
be younger than the soil fill that. I
and
mean,
I
based
think
on that.
that's an important point too, because you've
Yeah,
mentioned that a couple of times, that this is
right.
fill-in soil, right?
Filling soil, yeah,
Yeah,
very clear.
which people brought it in and filled it in.
That's right.
And as a geologist, you would know the
Yeah,
difference between natural arriving sediment and what
absolutely.
looks like, we trucked it in to fill it in.
Yeah. So if we look into that weathering soils, we will see the gradation between uh, the basement rocks, the rocks, and that is
Mhm.
like gradually weathered to the top. Yeah, gradually weathered upward. But the field soil has a distinct boundary between the soil and the bedrock.
Right.
Okay, good.
Distinctive. Yeah. So
So
that's one of the.
is this filled in? Do you think this is filled in like
Mm.
Göbekli Tepe was filled in? Like it was actively
Yeah,
filled in?
that's
Or
right. Yeah, very similar, and
okay.
it's kind of it's kind of interesting because
Yeah,
the filling time is like 9 to 10,000 years old. So
it's
it's
right
the same
about the
as Göbekli
same.
Tepe.
Yeah.
They're about the same time. So I don't know what happened in that period.
Yeah.
See, and that's something we've run across several things. Is like, I don't know what the thing is, but it feels like something happened that impacted people about that time, and we're just
Right.
flailing around to figure out what that thing is.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I had another question, because I know a lot of your research was like, there was some core samples and that kind of stuff, but it was mostly like ground penetrating radar and sensors. Was a large excavation just off the table? Was that just not going to be allowed because of the for whatever reasons? I mean, there's legitimate reasons to not dig something up. Or is that something that y'all have considered trying, like digging down to see if you find anything? Because I know one of the critiques that was thrown out was, oh, there weren't any I think he said there was no artifacts found, and you're saying you found artifacts. I'm like, well, that doesn't
Many.
match up. In the Graham Hancock debate today, what did the I can never remember the
Flint.
guy's name. Flint was like, oh,
Yeah.
they didn't find anything, or they only found one thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but you said you found lots of things. So,
Lots of things. Yes.
but is there is the option for a large archaeological dig something that you might be able to do, or is that just not going to be allowed by the government? I'm curious.
Yes, that's very. It's a good question. It's very important questions here. When we conduct the trenching, we conduct like 12 trenching, dig to 3 to 4 meters. One of them like dig to 11 meters. I think if at that time we asked the government and all the archaeologists to leave it open, just preserve it like in Göbekli Tepe, so people could still see it and observe by themselves and make their own mind, because it's good data. It's showing all the structures, the inside structures, Unit 2 and Unit 3, so people can debate in its side. That's why we asking the government to do that. But it's the archaeologists against that idea, because they say as the standard operation procedures in the research, after we dig the archaeological trenching, we have to bury them again. That's just the standard operation procedure in Indonesia, that they don't like making the exception for Gunung Padang also. So I'm really,
Is that the
very
standard
disappointed with that.
there? And the reason I'm asking is like we've seen pictures of the Galt site here, and they've left it open, and it's been open since the 90s. And there's another site just north of us in Waco, which is a famous famous mammoth discovery site, and it's been being researched for like 35 years, and it's still open too. Now they've built protections around that one. They built a whole building around that one to protect it, and rightly so, because there are exposed, like half exposed mammoths and camels and that kind of stuff. So is that just standard procedure there, or are they saying that standard procedure everywhere? Because I do know that sometimes sites get filled back in, but a lot of times they're kept open for additional research, so you don't have to like re-damage the site or contaminate what you've done. I don't know. I don't know if I asked my question well.
Yeah, it seems that the standard procedure here, because I know the reason, like the general reason. When we open the archaeological site and we make it open, then it will like prone to, bad people will take something from the site stuff like that. Means that if we open the site, there should be people who guard the site, right? So it's become an archaeological site and stuff. So I think like a standard procedures here in Indonesia.
And that's fair. I was just curious as to what the reasons were.
I would think the archaeologists, speak that just maybe for another reason. They just don't want to allow people to see the real Gunung Padang. Maybe, I don't know. But the thing is, in Indonesia, the archaeologists said that if you'd like to dig the site and then just let it open, then we have to move to, they call it the reconstruction phase. Reconstruction phase of the site. So it's not on the research phase, but on the reconstruction phase. That means we can dig much more digging, and then we let them open. So we could do like a comprehensive and comprehensive with the digging process without having to fill it again. So that we'd like to want to do that in Gunung Padang. So that's what we'd like to propose to the government. We do the excavation and then let it open for preservation.
So there's the potential for that to happen in the future.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah, we are still positive about that.
Oh, cool.
I'm trying to think if I have anything else here. Thank you so much for coming on and talking. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions for you.
And also I want to just say thank you for like bringing this kind of research and being willing to, go on Graham's show and that kind of stuff. Because I think the more people are aware of places that haven't gotten research, maybe the better chance of you getting funding for that kind of thing are. I know, there's the big famous sites like the cities in Mexico and Egypt, and everybody jumps to those. Yeah. It's like, but people have lived all over the planet, right?
I hope that we're finding things everywhere. Would lead to like much more exploration in many pyramids and all that magnificent megalithic all over the world. I think we should do that. Yeah.
And I think especially with Indonesia and the Pacific Islands and things like that part of the world, I don't think there's been enough research into like how is it really populated. Like we have a few ideas, but we've talked. Daniel and I have talked about like the Floriensis, the Hobbit, and nobody's talked about how they got there. Right. That discussion is just not happening at all. And I'm like, so who built the boat? Right. And they had to get there somehow. And they say it was never not an island. So how did they get that? These are the kind of what if type of, mental debates or thought experiments. That's the word I'm looking for. Thought experiments I like to explore. Because I don't think we give our ancestors, not just the Homo sapiens, but our ancestors enough credit for creativity, building. And I don't know if you saw, but this past year they published an article about the oldest known joinery of wood being formed together through carving. And it's way before. Yeah, it's like 500,000 years. With the new dating that they've done. Like they've known it was there for a long time, but they found a better dating method,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, that just blows everything out of the water.
Right.
Makes 27,000 seem a little more reasonable.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the cave painting in Indonesia, in Sulawesi, is 40,000 years old cave painting. And in
wow.
one of the painting there's a boat painting.
Oh.
Okay. 40,000 years old.
Yeah,
But it's just
people
it's a
didn't
myth.
have
It's a
boats back
myth
then.
of boats.
Yeah.
It's a myth of boats. It can't be a real boat. We can just discount that.
Yeah, it's just because at a certain point we've decided it's not fact; it's just myth, right?
It's
And that's
just myth.
and I mean, I sit here. I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm a child. I was born in the late '70s, and it's amazing to me how much we knew as fact that was just wrong. And I'm living proof of that because we have DNA now, and I'm like 3.5% or 2.5% Neanderthal, which I've done the DNA testing and stuff, and I came back in the 95th percentile for that. But when I was a kid, that wasn't a thing. They wouldn't even have considered, crossbreeding with Neanderthal and Homo sapien as even a possibility. So we are constantly being proven wrong, but people don't want to be open to the idea that we might be wrong. That's the, I don't understand where that's coming from. So that's part of why we do this podcast, to have people like you on and say, like, what have you found? Tell us more.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that, I am a scientist, and as a scientist, I really knows that what we know is very little compared to what we don't know. There are lots of things we don't know in the universe.
And I really appreciate the way that you're open to the new idea, but you're still approaching it in the scientific method that so many of us were taught in junior high and high school, which is hypothesis, test, analyze, go back and have people reproduce, which needs to happen. But man, at least, and to whoever put out the critique, have the courage to put your name on it, please. And not just for your paper, for all of them. If you're willing to challenge somebody's work, have the guts to put your name on the challenge so you can then talk about it, right? Not in an aggressive way, but you need to be able to have open debate. That's
right.
That's how we learn, right? And if you challenge it, let us know. We'll bring you on and let everybody
absolutely.
talk.
Yes. So then you could invite them to talk with this podcast also, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, we have said we'll let anybody come on and talk. So,
absolutely.
Thank you so much. This is awesome for us. Did you have anything that you wanted? Hey, it's technology. We both work in the tech field. Stuff happens. I just am. You're on the other side of the world, and we're talking over the computer. This is science fiction to me.
Amazing.
Is there anything you wanted to add before we wrapped up?
Yeah, I just would like to people to really like open mind, but keep your critics. Keep your what was that? We always have to be critical to all of the information, but keep your open mind with all the things and stuff, because there's lots of things we don't know. This ancient civilization, or whatever we call it, is very fascinating, and it's not just Gunung Padang. It also knows a lot of megalithics in all over the world. It's really amazing, and I think we know very little about that. Lots of misses of that, including the ages. If you search the ages of all that pyramid in South America, in whatever, in Egypt, in Italy, I didn't find any like a comprehensive carbon dating that for the ages, none of them in the publishing. How could that happen? I hope that scientists, archaeologists, geologists realize that and conduct the massive comprehensive work for all of the megalithic sites all over the world. It will be very, very interesting for us.
Yeah,
that's what
have you ever had the opportunity to travel to any of the sites in Mexico? Have you ever been able to see any of those?
The thing I haven't been. South America, I have been to Egypt. I've been to Göbekli Tepe, but I haven't been to South America. I would like to.
It's amazing, especially if you visit some of the sites that are lesser known in the Yucatan. I've had the chance to go a couple of times, and an interesting thing about the Yucatan Peninsula is it's flat, right? There's no natural hills on it.
Right.
And before you could, I don't think you can do it anymore, but when I went, you were able to, this was a city that was discovered in like the 30s or the 40s. You could go to the top of the pyramid, and it was the highest point on the Yucatan. And you could look, and as far as you could see to the horizon, it looked like there were hills covered in jungle. And the guide there was like, you have to realize that every one of those hills you see is a pyramid. Like, there's no hills here. And you could literally see hundreds of pyramids. And just the idea that, oh my God, this is a metropolis. This isn't like a pyramid site. This is a metropolis that had hundreds of thousands of people living here to be this large. So if you ever get the opportunity, it's absolutely it's humbling in a way that we thought we knew what was here. And we thought what we thought was hilly land is pyramids that we haven't even uncovered from. So that's also, if people wonder, like, well, where did the samples come from, right? Well, you could just go to Mexico and see how all the pyramids are grown over with vegetation, right? So this is how part of how that can happen. So thank you again. Maybe one of these days we'll be lucky enough to come visit Indonesia and see that site.
Sure, absolutely.